Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to another episode of HarlequinCasts, Dawn of War 2, Retribution. And today's episode is going to be another special cast. This is going to be developer chat number 2 here with Relic Entertainment. If any of you guys missed the dev chat earlier with Clint Tasker, go ahead and check that out. But today we're going to be doing nothing but going over the 3.14 patch notes, and those are going to be coming out pretty soon. And I'd like to preface this just by talking a little bit about patches in general. Now, there are some people who, when a patch comes out, they like to look at each and every element of the patch and think to themselves, does that or does that not bring the game closer to the platonic ideal of the game that I envision in my mind? And fortunately, I presuppose the existence of no such game. I know that there is no truly ever balanced game. Nobody finishes balancing a game. They just stop balancing it at some point. So I take a much more Aristotelian point of view, which is that I would rather just simply know how this game is now going to change into a different game, and how do I need to adapt my habits, how do I need to adapt my build orders, what sorts of metagame changes are we going to expect, and all that sort of thing. So here today, to help me out with all these epistemological, nay, ontological quandaries, is Mr. Braden Chane from Relic Entertainment. Brad, how are you doing today, sir?
I'm doing good. As you know, I'm the balance designer that's in charge of this patch. You guys usually deal with a tasker, but he's moved on to bigger things, and now I'm the douche that you gotta deal with.
All right. So today, you're out there doing your thing, working on patch 3.14. So I think I'll just go ahead and just get into some of the most popular questions. What I did was I went out there, I put a couple of threads up on the major Dawn of War websites, and literally very scientifically went through and just counted all of the questions and kind of tried to distill them into popular themes. And so I thought we'd kind of walk through some of that. So let's just get right into that, and then we can kind of go over kind of where the patch is at in your mind and where the state of the game is and everything. So the first question out there that wasn't really tied to a particular note, this just kind of came up through all of the patches, was autocannons. A lot of people just wanted to know more about autocannons because clearly their role sort of changed a little bit. And what were your metagame reasons for kind of changing that around, or how do you expect them to get used going forward?
Well, I think we can all say that autocannons were never really used competitively or were viable at all in the current state of the game. So we really just wanted to, put them out there so that they could actually be useful. And I mean, with a heavy weapon team, when you upgrade it, usually people upgrade it to las cannons because, las cannons are such a good AV. But when you upgrade it to an autocannon, what does it do? It kind of just, shits the bed, and then just becomes useless. So, we wanted to change the damage type to it. So in the patch notes, you can see that it's changed to explosive PvP, which allows it to actually do a lot of decent damage to infantry and vehicles across the board. So if you're doing a heavy weapon team build and you're going forward in the tier 2, you're not sure if the guy's going vehicles or is going to focus on infantry, you can make a safe bet of upgrading your heavy weapon team into an autocannon, which will give you like a more like all-around answer to what you might expect.
Gotcha. So if you don't see a vehicle yet, it's better than just like blindly getting a a lot of players will blindly get a Bright Lance and then no vehicles pop up and they're done. Well, like an Imperial Guard player could upgrade a Heavy Bolter to an autocannon and kind of cover his bases depending on what comes out in the field. All right, that sounds pretty good. So do you kind of expect that to work its way into build orders as just kind of a neutral upgrade?
I believe like SM before there, you can also do like scout builds with, double heavy weapon teams or even maybe triple heavy weapon teams. It's just nice to see more variety in unit comp than just like a traditional standard, one heavy weapon team, TAC, ASM, something like that. It just gives a little bit more variety, a little bit more flavor to the game.
Nice, yeah, I could definitely see double heavy weapons with one of them being autocannon or something like that, having a lot of variety there. So that's kind of cool. And just kind of a follow-up question to that, just the overall impression that a lot of people had of this patch was that anti-vehicle stuff in general, just kind of across the board, was buffed. Obviously the autocannon was, but just kind of all over the place. We see lots of little anti-vehicle nerfs. Was that deliberate on your part? Did you see there was something lacking with vehicle play?
You mean anti-vehicle buffs?
Yeah.
Yeah, we felt that a lot, especially for the races that just had a dedicated AV unit, usually one isn't really good enough to deal with like a double blood crusher in your base. You usually need two or something, and then once you invest in that, they just become a capping unit. Not to say capping is a bad thing, but like yeah, we just might wanted to make it a little cheaper, a little more affordable, so that players can actually deal with it by investing in two squads of AV and dealing with the vehicle without investing too much and setting them behind in the game against whoever they're playing against.
Cool.
Because generally you'll right now with the current prices you invest in like two Venom Broods or two Tank Busters, right? That kind of impedes your power or your wreck, and once you have those units kind of become useless. And well, not to say useless, they can still cap, but the player usually might just go to tier 3 or get something even bigger and just wipe the floor with you after.
Yeah, that's cool. So let's move right on here to the Space Marines. The first big one that was out there had to do once again with this idea of anti-vehicle kind of buffs and some changes like that. We saw that the Force Commander had some significant changes to his AV potential, what with the Flesh over Steel ability there being modified a little bit. Was that just basically to make kind of his teleporting and Flesh over Steel a little bit more viable? And how do you feel, I mean, does that kind of make the Power Fist a little bit more appealing than Thunderhammer, or do you think they still both have very distinct roles and that sort of thing?
Well, yeah, making the energy cost between teleport and Flesh over Steels, definitely allowed that synergy now, where before, it wasn't even viable. I mean, you could teleport, but you wouldn't really have the energy to do it, and you'd be like, oh shit, now I just teleported for nothing. but yeah, I don't think people are just gonna pick the Power Fist over the Thunderhammer, because the Thunderhammer does a lot of crazy shit to infantry. It just kills a lot of infantry. So if you want to deal with infantry, then you're still gonna want the Thunderhammer, I think. And if you want to deal with vehicles, the Force Commander can actually deal with them a little bit easier, because I think a lot of players know how hard it is to land a Flesh over Steel,
having to get right up next to the vehicle, and it's always kind of out of reach.
Yeah, pretty much, So I mean, with this thing, like, it just gives some type of synergy with the war gear, and everyone likes doing combos and doing that type of synergy with different units in this game, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's pretty good. So the next one we had, and this was okay. So if I had to rank order the top 5 questions that were out there, and again, I was pretty scientific, counted up the number of questions that everybody submitted. This one would probably be number 3, which was everyone out there was just talking about the tactical Space Marines getting a bit cheaper this patch. They got knocked down to, 450 rec, and people were pretty much just, everybody was on both sides of that argument, but obviously it's going to speed up the early game just a little bit there for the Space Marines. But how were you hoping that would change it, and how were you hoping that would balance it and that sort of thing?
Well, a lot of players kind of, I read on the forums, a lot of people kind of expected this just because, in the previous patch we reduced the cost of Chaos Space Marines to 400. But yeah, basically this change was to, help out the SM early game, just give them a little extra reckless spend. I don't really think it's going to change the matchup entirely. It just makes, tax a little bit, double tax a little bit more viable. But of course, in some situations, you're still going to want to get that ASM instead of that second tack, and it just helps overall. Just the little things, that extra 50 rec can allows the SM player to get a generator up, or if he ends up losing some Space Marines, some tax, he can reinforce them for a little bit cheaper. So it just really helps out that early game matchup that I think a lot of people can agree SM does have a really difficult time in the early game.
Yeah, and that was, by the way, a question that was already answered actually on the forums, but I had a couple of people had asked, like, oh, will its resupply cost go down? And then enough forum people were clever enough to figure out that, yes, resupply is already a function of what the base cost was, so that kind of works itself all out already. And then here's kind of a follow-up question to that, and this was, again, another heated topic that was kind of nestled into the Tactical Marines. But a lot of people were wondering now that since the Tactical Marines are a little bit cheaper, a lot of people anticipated it, as you said, but they also expected some sort of a nerf to go on to the Apothecary heal, because they thought that the Apothecary in a lot of early Tier 1 was a pretty hard thing out there. From a balance perspective, do you guys think the Apothecary heal is where it should be, or are you looking at it all? What do you think about all that?
Well, yeah, the community might grill me on this, but it's fine. I'm gonna talk straight to the community right now. It's fine. Don't worry about it. Like, I don't really see a problem with it. You know, we all I don't everyone says, healing is such a big problem with the path, but is SM really on the top of the ladder on the race? Really? Can we all answer that? No, no, yeah, yeah. Oh no, no, I don't think so. But yeah, I mean, with these cheaper attacks, if we end up seeing SM like all over the leaderboard on like all game modes with just like tack blobbing and a path, then I'll go out and say, sorry guys, I was wrong. Path healing needs to get nerfed. But there's a lot of things in this game that prevent blobbing. There's, I don't know what's that called, artillery, and yeah, there's tons of it, and it shouldn't be a problem.
I respect a man who has the courage to stand by the conviction of his words and just give me a solid yes or no answer. So yeah, that's pretty good. Okay, I will take that, and we will certainly feel that. But of course, whenever you ask anybody their position of a balance, I always take the example of like somebody coming up to you and saying, okay, rock is totally overbalanced, but paper is totally fine. Sincerely, scissors. Everyone has their side of the argument, and I don't know that a lot of people who hate or don't hate it are truly objective in their criticisms. But moving on to the next one on the list there, we have the Scouts, the Scout Sniper in particular. So that cost was reduced a little bit. However, the reinforcement cost has a newfound power added to it. So it sounds like, in general, were you just trying to, punish them a little bit for resupplying, making sure they had to pay the power at some point, or what was kind of the vision there, and how do you expect that to get used?
Well, the thing is, you spend power to upgrade into snipers, but once you do upgrade, the scout basically turns into a different unit. It becomes a sniper unit that can shoot things from afar, and we just want players to be able to pay a little more when you're reinforcing. Obviously, the cost before it was super high in rec and totally was not worth it. So we brought the rec down, but we still want to keep that power cost because technically we can say that Scout Sniper is really a tier 1.5 unit now once you upgrade it.
Okay, gotcha, and that's just kind of keeping in line with that type of mentality there. Okay, seems fair enough. And then the last one I thought was kind of interesting. A lot of people were questioning why, or not even like objecting to it, but just kind of curious, like, oh, why did the Land Raider get its cost increased in this patch? Because frankly, and I sort of, I kind of agreed with this version, which is that in 1 versus 1, I never really saw it get used or abused that much, and I thought maybe in team games is what you were kind of shooting for, but I don't know. What was your experience with the Land Raider, and what influenced you to kind of increase its cost there?
Yeah, this wasn't really directed towards any game mode with the Land Raider. We just felt that the vehicle itself did a lot, killed a lot of shit, so we just felt like it was worth more. Basically, yeah. The thing just needed to cost more. Sorry, I kind of lost my train of thought right there. But yeah, like compared to the Battle Wagon, I can obviously say that the Land Raider is better than the Battle Wagon just because if anyone's used the Land Raider and moved it up to a blob of infantry, knows that it just
tends to make a more of a first impression that a Battle Wagon does. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, we just felt that it needed to cost a little more.
Okay, so it seemed like it was doing a little bit more damage than its cost was. Okay, I can respect that. Let's move right along here to our next major faction, and again, we're just kind of going straight down the patch notes here. So the Tyrannid. Okay, so the first one, and this was a very popular one, at least amongst Tyrannid stuff there. There weren't too many Tyrannid questions out there. Was the Venom Brood. So the Venom Brood got a nice discount here, and it seemed to be in line with all of the anti-vehicle buffs that we saw in general, and people didn't have a problem with that. The question on the forums mostly was, did you anticipate that a lot of people just get the Venom Brood purely for its ranged synapse, and that this makes the ranged synapse, the ranged synergy much easier and quicker to get? And was that the balance, or was it the AV part of it, or I don't know? What's your thoughts?